Did someone say presents? Yes, it's me, Jeff at Leo's Camera Supply. I just thought, why not look at cameras in a different way? Instead of thinking of budget, let's just think about features. So I thought this would be an interesting way of looking at it. Let's imagine you were given one of these as a present and you had to go, ooh, I like that, thank you very much, and not worry about the cost. But of course, cost is always a concern, but let's have a look. You shouldn't have. Of course, we did an unboxing on this a few months ago, and it's basically, of course, the Panasonic GH5. Now, what was beautiful about this camera, it was best way to describe it, it was basically a camera split down the middle. You have an incredible photo, incredible video ability all in one. Now, the camera, of course, do a quick run through, 20 megapixels for the stills, 5-axis image stabilization. You have the ability to do not only 1080, but 4K video recording. But strangely enough, in the photo end of things, you have 4K photo mode, which is 8.8 megapixels at 30 frames per second, and 6K photo mode, and I stress photo mode, to do 18.8 megapixels, or sorry, 18.8 megapixels at a frame rate of 30 frames per second. But in the 4K with this particular one, you can actually do 60 frame progressive, so stills, I should say. So doing action, sports, wildlife photography would be amazing, a feat that you could scrub is the term, or find that one single photograph that you wanted to blow up, and at either 8.8 or even 18.8 megapixel, it would be an incredibly large print you could do if you needed to. But as what we've probably seen online and all the reviews, this is an incredible package for somebody that is looking for something basically right down the middle. Now, with this camera, you have the ability to add your 3-pin XLR to expand on the audio recording, so more advanced audio recording than the built-in microphones. You have the V-Log key, basically unlocking the exposure, the raw exposure ability with the video recording. So that is a appealing feature to really open up furthermore, the video functionality. So with adding these to it, I would probably say instead of 50-50, it's more like 70% video and 30% photo when you have that expansion ability. So there's that. Now, hey, ooh, another present. DC G9, I should say. What we have here is now a camera that is more almost 100% or maybe 90% photo, and they stripped away less of the video functionality with this camera. With this, you basically have still the 20 megapixel sensor, and the image stabilization in the body. But what they've done now is that they utilize the ability to take the image stabilization feature on the sensor and being able to accumulate a higher megapixel ability. So instead of the 20, you have the 80 megapixel ability with this. Now, of course, not for fast moving subject matter. This is more for architectural landscape where there's not trees moving, but this was more geared for photographers, I should say. So why would somebody go for this versus this? Simply put, I've had a lot of people who typically say, well, you know what, I'm not a videographer. Why do I want to pay for that extra feature where I'll never use that? Well, this is now more for photo. So that's that separation. Other companies, not naming them, that was something that you couldn't choose from. If you wanted one of their cameras that was the X feature, you have to have it with video. They didn't offer this type of separation. Now, we could talk about this in more details afterwards, but again, this is more for the photographer. Now, why you're watching this video is because of this guy. Oh, you really shouldn't have. Of course you should. This is now, of course, the new GH5s. Now, with the S, as we were talking about before, the GH5 which is this, the S is not replacing the GH5. This is to complement either one of these if you were going to possibly use a 2-camera setup, but this was really for videographers, cinematographers. So if you call the G9 your photo camera, photographer's camera, this is your video or cinematography camera, and this is your hybrid of best of both worlds. But what brings us to this camera is what, strangely enough, is not the photo ability, because this is only 10 megapixels or 10 point something megapixels, so I apologize on the exact specifications, but it is a lower resolution. Now you might say, 10 megapixels, I'll never be able to use that for photography. Well, of course you wouldn't use it for any serious big enlargements you're going to be ever doing. This is really for video applications, or low light, which is why they sacrifice the higher megapixels for the lower, which then gives you the ability to go to this really high ISO capabilities with this one. Let's open this up. Instruction manuals, of course. What you'll find in here is, of course, the camera. Before I talk about the details of the camera, what we've noticed, I'm just going to mention what comes as part of the package. So first of all, it comes with your charger. Now, this has the ability to charge by USB. So with that, you can plug this in, and then you have the AC adapter that's included. Now, something that I've discovered previous to this one, I'm not sure if you were aware of the advantage of having a USB charging device or way of charging instead of solely, those cameras, some of the manufacturers have a pull-out plug that plugs into the wall, convenient for its size. But actually, for my system that I have in my camera bag, I could actually plug this into one of those external battery packs that most of us use for now charging up our cell phones, which keeps on dying on us on a too frequent basis. But now I could actually have this in my backpack charging a secondary battery while I'm walking around to the next location. So that, I was actually quite surprised and really thrilled with that. Now, it comes with a USB-C to USB 3 to your computer from the camera directly. Now, for transferring your images or video-wise, but here's the thing that some of you might not be familiar with. This looks like a very common PC cord, and this is a BNC, which again, unless you're into videography, cinematography, you might not be aware of this, but this has, through the PC terminal, which normally for flash-wise, will allow you to synchronize with time code to multiple cameras and allowing you to do live timed synchro recording. Quickly getting back to the GH5, the GH5 has time code, but that's for in post to synchronize off afterwards. This, with the ability to synchronize multiple cameras at the moment of setting up, you could now do a live sequence, like for streaming applications or more simplicity of recording all at the same time when they're all timed together, synchronized together. So that's basically what comes in the package. Now let's talk about the camera. I'm assuming everyone's familiar with the GH5 and maybe not so much the G9, but if we use this compared to the GH5, it is very similar in its look and construction-wise. So it has this really heavy-duty feel to it. Magnesium alloy, really rugged up on top. Again, as our previous video that we did on the GH5, the ruggedness allows us to still incorporate the XLR audio adapter to plug up on top to then give you the ability to add more serious microphones from 3-pin XLR types, wireless, hardwired. So as you see here, that simple ability. And then you have your 3-pin XLRs and then your audio settings you could adjust manually. But again, we've already covered this with the GH5. So the S, what is the S? As I was saying before, you have the the lower resolution sensor. A lower resolution sensor, or less pixel density, allows for higher ISO, which means instead of all this talk about the technical aspects of it, let's put a real world situation. I say to clients, and if you're one of them watching, you'll probably have heard this many times, but I always say, like, if you wanted to, or if you needed to video record, let's say 3 o'clock in the back alleyway behind our store at 3 o'clock in the morning, this is the type of camera that you could work with the existing light you have. Now, the closest camera that was famous for that, or at least it was the go-to, was Sony's Alpha 7S series of camera, which had, again, 10 megapixel. Yes, it's a bigger sensor, but the thing that we've always brought up was the pros and cons of a bigger sensor. The advantage of this size of sensor is that the camera is smaller, the lenses are smaller, everything is smaller. Now, why is smaller better in some cases? Tripods, stabilizers, or your active or passive Steadicam type of devices, your jibs, mounting onto various devices, it's a lot simpler, cheaper, which is something that a lot of people forget. When you have a full-size DSLR, those things become incredibly heavy. But the other point of having a smaller sensor and, in this case, a lower resolution is the speed it takes from the data from the sensor into the memory cards. This camera has faster recording capabilities than what the GH5 offers, again, for video applications. So higher bit rates, better slow motion, or higher frame rate for slower slow motion. These are things that a lot of people forget, that opens a new world to your videography that we were limited to back from the days of at the beginning of like your Canon 5D Mark IIs, where we were just thrilled with the fact that you could do high definition on a still camera. We are now looking at the next generation. We are looking at a camera that is right up with a lot of the more professional cinematography cameras in a form factor and price point that is reasonable.